What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, in this video today, I'm going to be going over a player that I think the Baltimore Ravens absolutely need to look at because he's going to be extremely cheap. And I think he could provide a lot of value to the Baltimore Ravens team. Now, before I get into the video, guys, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. And let me know in the comment section what you guys think about potentially going after John Ross. Now, I've mentioned him. I mentioned him yesterday, actually, in a video. And in the airtime, he's been brought up a couple of times. I've seen it on Twitter a little bit. And I figure it deserves a video because I'm really on board. I think it would be a great move. Now, let's get into it. John Ross, former first-round pick from the Cincinnati Bengals, former heavily overdrafted first-round pick by the Cincinnati Bengals. Would I call him a bust? Yes. Why? Because he was not worth a first-round pick, and they used that first, and they were not successful whatsoever with him. They were hoping he would be that deep threat and be a truly game-changing, a Tyreek Hill level, even though when they drafted him, Tyreek Hill wasn't the Tyreek Hill we know today, but that type of player, right? Someone that teams fears so much, and you pair him with an AJ Green and Andy Dalton and him, it was going to be a dynamic trio right there. Didn't end up working out, but he kept getting hurt. He ended up going to the New York Giants last year. He played in 10 games, only started one, had 20 targets, 11 receptions, 224 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, you know what I like about that? 20.4 yards per reception. He's a deep threat. That's what he was at Washington. That's what he is in the NFL. He is a guy that you put out there for speed. And that's why he was drafted so high. He ran a 4.22, fastest 40-yard dash in NFL history. He is someone that I believe the Ravens could absolutely use. Right? They need that speedy deep threat. They have players that are fast. Devin Duvernay is fast, okay? But Devin Duvernay isn't a deep threat in my opinion, okay? He is a get the ball short and he has the burners to turn it up and bounce off tackles and take it 80 yards. Like he's a big play threat, but I don't see him as a torch the defense over the top, kind of like Marquise Hollywood Brown has been for the Baltimore Ravens in these last couple of seasons. Now people may say, "Oh, why do you think that?" If he was the deep threat that that some people think he is, they would use him as a deep threat. And I know there's a lot of blame on Greg Roman, but Greg Roman used Hollywood Brown as a deep threat, right? Hollywood got by people as a deep threat. Devin Duvernay, his biggest play was on a 4th and 17, I believe, or 3rd and 17 against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He had like a 28-yard reception. He was actually not really underneath, but they ran 4 verticals, and he was the lowest level, and Lamar Jackson hit him for a great pass, okay? He has speed. However, I see him as an intermediate. I see him as a slot wide receiver. He was one of the best slot wide receivers in college football. I think he'd be a great slot receiver for the Baltimore Ravens, I think he's very good. I think Rashad Bateman has the ability to go deep. He can make contested catches. So can James Prochet and Tylan Wallace. I'm not saying they're not able to get deep plays. But the speed threat that I think the Baltimore Ravens need is not on the roster. They do not have a player, in my opinion, that can go long and teams will look at and say, we have to put a man over the top. And John Ross is a player, whether or not you think he's a great player or not, is a deep threat. Teams line up against him and they go, you know what? We can't go one-on-one. Whether or not he's not a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Like when teams line up against, DeAndre Hopkins or Devontae Adams. Remember when the Ravens lined up against Devontae Adams and they doubled him like every play? Like teams aren't like, oh man, oh no, every single time. But they see a deep threat. A deep threat is the only other player outside of like a true number 1 that teams are like, oh man, we got to make sure that we really focus in on this guy. No offense to guys like Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen, I think, is probably a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. But teams don't go up against him and say, we got to double him all the time. No offense to Hunter Renfrow. No offense to, I'm trying to think of other wide receivers that are not deep threats that are pretty good. They're not the guys that are getting like absolutely double teamed. Why? Because if they're going to beat you, it's going to be on a 10-yard play. And while it's unfortunate to get beaten for 10 yards, maybe they'll double team them on a 3rd and 8 or whatever it is. But on a 1st and 10, they're not doubling them. Because if they double them, typically the teams have another player that they are worried about. The Baltimore Ravens roster right now, you can argue that Mark Andrews is a double team, right? If you go up against the Ravens. If we have a deep threat, a speed threat, and teams want to double Mark Andrews, that means that we will have that deep threat in one-on-one. No offense to any of the Baltimore Ravens wide receivers that we have. But I don't think any of them are going to burn their defenders and get down the sideline and be even available to have a deep play opportunity. Now, in a one-on-one situation, could Rashad Bateman go deep and get into a jump ball situation? Absolutely. Can he win it? Yes, he can. But sometimes you don't want to take those jump ball opportunities. We saw so many times Hollywood Brown and Lamar Jackson, it wasn't a jump ball because Hollywood beat his guy against the Indianapolis Colts, against the Cincinnati Bengals, against the Miami Dolphins. We've seen it time and time again. Hollywood Brown getting behind the defense and Lamar Jackson hitting him stride for stride. We don't have that anymore. Lamar Jackson wasn't hitting any. Lamar Jackson's played with all the recurring Ravens wide receivers. He wasn't hitting any of them for deep plays. Now, he hit Sammy Watkins once. Sammy Watkins not on the team anymore. Right? It was Hollywood. Hollywood was always the guy that was open deep. Now, he may throw up a couple of jump balls to guys like Mark Andrews and things like that. And that's totally fine. I'm all for throwing the jump balls. But I want a player like John Ross, who last year was on a $1 million deal for 1 year. Signing him to another minimum contract in a prove-it deal in a system where he will actually get playing time. Remember, he was behind Darius Slayton. He was behind Sterling Shepard. He was behind Kenny Golladay. He was behind Kadarius Toney. He was on the back end of that roster. With the Baltimore Ravens, he could be in a... Greg Roman likes to use a plethora of wide receivers because he sees different situations, and whether or not we like Greg Roman or not, he's here to stay, unfortunately. He's going to use them, right? He's going to throw Miles Boykin out there to block. He's going to sub out Hollywood Brown because he feels like he's not going to be able to be good enough at blocking. He's going to use his wide receivers to the best of his ability. He's going to throw Patrick Ricard out at wide receiver. Whatever fits his play the best, he's going to try and put it out there. And John Ross would come in as a speed threat. He wouldn't be out there every play. He wouldn't demand to be out there every play. Like if we went after a Will Fuller or a T.Y. Hilton of sorts, because those guys are players that are used to being out there every single play. John Ross would go out there when needed, and all of a sudden the Ravens would have an instant deep threat. And we wouldn't even need to hit him. Him being out there may take that safety off of Mark Andrews because they realize, we need to cover the top. And all of a sudden now Mark Andrews is one-on-one, Lamar Jackson can hit him. Or they don't cover Mark Andrews, or they double Mark Andrews, and they have John Ross going deep, and that one-on-one, like that corner, maybe they're running zone coverage, he's going to bite on John Ross because they are worried about that speed, and maybe that allows Bateman or Duvernay or Tyler Wallace or James Prochet or whatever wide receiver the Ravens have. It allows them to get open. Having a deep threat is crucial in the NFL currently. Whether or not they get hit, it's the threat. And John Ross would be a threat to go long and have big plays. And it would happen. Lamar Jackson, we all know. Ravens fans know. The national media may not know this, but Lamar Jackson is a fantastic thrower of the deep ball. He can hit his wide receivers in stride when they are open down the field. Right? That is one of his best abilities. That's probably his best throwing ability, is his ability to have great arm strength and touch throwing down the field. We need him to be able to use that. Last year, whenever Hollywood is out, we lose that deep threat. We lose it. And now we don't even have Hollywood on the roster. We do not have that deep threat. And so when teams play against the Baltimore Ravens, it's very similar to the New Orleans Saints and how they've had to play in the last couple of years. They have some great players. Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara. They have great guys, but they didn't have a deep threat with Drew Brees, right? Drew Brees also couldn't really throw it deep, but that's besides the point. Safeties could play up. Corners could press. It condensed the field, making it harder to play the game. Why is it harder to pass the football when you're in the red zone? Because there's no threat of the deep ball. When you have the deep ball at the 50-yard line, teams have to play farther back. If the Ravens don't have a deep threat starting at the beginning of this year, it's going to be very difficult for them to stretch the field and allow for the defense to back up. Because if the defense backs up against the Baltimore Ravens, that allows for Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Ricard, Devin Duvernay, Rashad Bateman, all of those players to work underneath, in the middle, running it up the middle, checking it down to the short. It just allows for so much more opportunity. And John Ross could absolutely be the cheapest option. You can argue, maybe you can throw out a guy like the deep threat Deshaun Jackson, but Deshaun Jackson is significantly older, right? John Ross could go back to the form that the Bengals were hoping he would turn into prior to injuries. And if he doesn't, that's okay, because he still brings the deep threat the deep threat. I guess energy is the kind of a word that works there, but the deep threat possibility. Guys, I really think that going after a guy like John Ross, because he is so cheap. Now, I would also love to get a Julio Jones or a Will Fuller in addition. I would love for us to sign 2 players. But John Ross, if the Ravens say, we don't have a lot of money, we don't want to spend a ton of money, but we kind of want to, one more wide receiver, John Ross should be that guy. Let me know what you guys are thinking about in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe for Daily Ravens content. If you guys want to join the airtime, please do so. We went live last night, had some fun. We were live for about a half an hour. Go check it out. It's in the description down below. And thank you so much, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.